we just want to make it more of a just community, and I know the reason that we're doing this is because you have people here, you have experienced loss, or you may be close to somebody passing away, and you need to know that you're not alone. You need to know that you're not by yourself. You need to know that what you're going through is not something that is foreign, that people experience these things a lot of times. One of the things I did want to say, Sister Mickles, is that there does come a point that if you grieve too long, it can affect you really, I mean, physically, emotionally, and everything. I was dealing with a lady, her son passed away, and this was like about 25 years ago. And he was her favorite child. She had 3 other kids, but he was her favorite child. He was very close. And I guess he had to be maybe 14, 15, 16, and he passed away. And she was married, but she grieved so hard that when we helped her to try to get through some stuff, she could never get through it. And then 1 year went by, and 2 years went by, 3 years went by, 4 years went by, 5 years. And every time I would see her and talk to her, she was still talking as if it had happened yesterday. And eventually, it caused her to start having some emotional problems. It caused her to have some physical problems. It just affected her relationships with people. She ended up, her and her husband, after being married for 20 plus years, they got a divorce because there were just a lot of things that he could not deal with, and it affected her. She lost a lot. She was a very petite lady, but she even lost a lot of weight, and very beautiful lady, and I mean, it was just a lot of things, but she didn't realize, okay, you've got to move on. You don't forget that person. You see what I'm saying? But life still has to go on. And so what we want to do tonight, I had given them some questions, and we're going to give each one of them maybe 2 minutes to maybe ask some things, because and then if you have a question, we will bring the mic to you, and you can ask a question. But I really do believe that we just need to talk about the hard things. Some people won't come to something like this because they say, it's too painful. I don't want to bring up the past. But I always look at it this way. I look at it this way. Jesus is not taking you back to your past. He's starting at the beginning, and he's walking you toward his healing, because we've all got to be healed. The Bible says that God is close to the brokenhearted and to those that are crushed in spirit. And a lot of times we don't deal with grief. We don't deal with pain. We just brush it under the carpet, and we just don't deal with it. And so I want each one of them, and you can decide who want to answer first. And we have 2 mics there. But the first question is, a lot of times when people are going through grief, and people call, and people want to know what happened. They want to get into the details. They want to know how you feel and everything. One of the things that we want to talk about tonight is the wrong things people say to those whose loved ones have passed away. Or not just if something tragic happened in your life, some of the things that people have said to you that really upset you, it didn't help it. It was almost like Job's friends. They came to Job and they said, this is the reason why this is happening. And so who would like to answer that first question? Wrong things that people have said to you, and how did that affect you? Because I think that's something that we need to talk about. All right. So who would be the first person? Sister Rosalind. Okay. Grab the mic.
For me, it was people who would come to you and they'd be like, I know how you feel, but they never lost anybody. So they really don't know how you feel, but they're just trying to say something. And you know, a lot of times we don't know what to say. When you don't know what to say, just hold the person and don't say anything, because that's better than saying the wrong thing. For me, that was one that really got my pet peeves.
Well, um, I remember a friend of mine said the same thing. Um, I know how you feel, brother, but until you have to sit on these front seats at the funeral, you don't know how I feel. You can sit back there in the back and say, I know how you feel, but until you have to sit right in front of that casket and think of all the times and the things that you went through with your loved one that you will never see again. You know, those times are gone, and you don't know how I feel.
One is they'll tell you to be strong, and that's something you can't do at that time. And everybody's different, depending on how you lost a loved one. You know, if you lost it to a tragic accident, you know, you can be strong for a minute, but you know, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, you know, why this happened. Um, you're thinking, why did this happen? Um, Depending on how the situation was, it wasn't my fault. You know, that's something that you have to deal with. You know, to get in it, and people that was here, they know that when my mom passed, you know, we all just had a was having leaving April's baby shower for Trinity, and it was just around the corner, and I was driving, so you know that's wasn't my fault. You know, even though it wasn't my fault, but that's what plays in your mind. But you know, people tell you, you know, you have to be strong. And, you know, you're not gonna be strong. I wasn't gonna be strong. I just lost my mom. You know, I had to be strong in certain people's eyes, but um, you know, and just like Sister Roslyn and Brother Rose say, you know, the words they try to come from your heart, but just like I said, sometimes you just have to be quiet. You know, I'm not bringing up Sister Darlene, but just like when her husband passed, I text her and I just told her I'm praying for you because I know now. You know, I understand. You can't say everything's gonna be okay. You don't know what that person may be going through. You know, yeah, it will be okay eventually, but grieving when you grieve, it's been what 15 years now for my mom. I still have my moments.
Oh yeah.
You know, it would never go away. Grieving, it does not have a time frame. It's just a point of dealing with it. And just like Sister Milka said, you function. You know, there's a time when that's what I did on a day-to-day basis. I woke up every day because I knew it was something I had to do. I had to get back to work. I was out of work almost a month and a half. I couldn't go back to work. You know, it wasn't, you know, I couldn't go back to work at that time because I wasn't ready to deal with what I was used to on a daily. I told my mom about 10 times out of the day at work, you know, so life was changing, you know. So, you know, when somebody tell you to be strong or everything's going to be okay, it's not. Not until you walk in that person's shoes or something like that happened to you. Now, if you're feeling that, you know, you see somebody on their deathbed, it's a little different, I think. You still never really prepare for it, depending on how you feel about the person or however. But just like you said, certain words can get you. Words can really get you, you know, and to be strong and, you know, I know how you feel and, you know, it happened for a reason. You know, okay, well, exactly. You know, at that point in time, it doesn't matter. And then at that point in time, when you're in your feelings, you want to get a sledgehammer and probably bust them upside the head, or you want to really find something to damage, and you go through that. I mean, you will go through that time after time after time. It was plenty of times I wanted to grab a sledgehammer and just tear up that whole house, you know, but I had to clean it, so that wasn't gonna happen. I had to think about it. I had to clean up this mess. But it's true. I mean, that's what you go through. I mean, and like I said, if it's shocking, yeah. Pastor said he felt I was in shock when it happened. But I think you get to you're at the point that like you're sitting next to this person, just 5 minutes eating ice cream or whatever, and then a couple hours later you have to tell somebody, "Mama's gone." What? Who understands that until it happens to you?
Praise God. You want to say anything, Sister Nichols, on that?
Well,
Put the mic, because
yes, of course. Thinking about my daughter, April, she said, "Mom, don't talk too loud." So I think that's subconsciously. But also, one of the things people say is that, they're in a better place. They're in a better place. And don't cry, because they wouldn't want you to cry over them, So, and then, I also, this is kind of like a two-edged sword, but realizing that people do want to comfort you, you have to try to understand that they don't know where they're coming from and they don't know what to say. So try not to be so hard on them if you're in that situation again.
Thank you for those answers. I think those were some good answers to really, try to help some people, to deal with some things. One of the most tragic things I've ever experienced was I was probably 21, 22 years old, and 21 or 22 years old, and the pastor had gone out of town, and so we had a faithful member in our church on a Wednesday night. I just remember that. And that she had just had an argument with her husband, because she said, "Won't you come to church with me?" And then he said, "No, I ain't going to no church." And so she got all the kids in the car, which I think it was 3 of them. And 5 minutes later, somebody was banging on his door, and they were weeping and they were crying. He said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" He said, your wife and them, they were in an accident." He said, Where? He said, she tried to beat the train, and the train hit her car, and it flipped up in the air, and it killed her instantly. And all the children were badly wounded, with broken bones and pelvis and everything. And pastor, God spoke to him when he was getting ready to get on the plane and say, "Don't get on that plane." But he wasn't there, and here I am, a 22-year-old, and I have never dealt with nothing like this before. And I was like, "Okay, God." He was at his wife was dead, and he was at the hospital with the children, and she was dead. And I was asking myself, I said, "Okay, God, what do you say to somebody who they were on their way to church? They were on their way to church. What do you say to somebody? What do you say?" Oh man, I was like, "God, you got to help me." And that's all I just remember is when I walked in that room, I just put my arms around him and I just cried with him. I didn't say, "It's going to be all right. What's her name?" I just let him just basically just talk. And sometimes we there's a time to try to put a spiritual turn on things, but then there's a time where you just have to be quiet, because people, they already know that. They already know it, and at that time, that's just not a good time. But, if we're out here, just remember that, sometimes it's just be quiet. Just be in their presence. Just give them a hug, and let them do, whatever needed to be done. I know when Tracy's mother passed away, you know, it was early. She called me, and she was so calm and so collective, and I was like, what? I hung up the phone. And then I called her. I said, what did you say? And then I went, and, you know, it was hard. It was really hard. And then all of a sudden, you know, I wasn't thinking about church. We had church that morning. I wasn't thinking about church. And all of a sudden, she just said, I want to go to church. I was like, what? You know, I didn't say, well, you grieving. That's what she felt like. And so, you know, we came and we supported her. But sometimes you just got to be careful what you're going to say. Can we take another question? This question is, can you just describe very briefly some of the things you went through when this traumatic thing happened to you? What were some of the things that you went through personally? Because everybody sometimes they grieve differently, but what were some things that you went through? I know you gave us 7 stages, but what were some things that you dealt with when it came to that? So who wants to be one of the first ones to, okay.
Okay, when that happened with me, I didn't eat. Okay. Because when things are going on in my life, you know, certain people can eat for depression or whatever. I can't eat, so I got real small. And I'm pretty sure y'all remember how small I ended up getting. It was hard. It was just hard. Like I said, it was just I didn't want to get out of bed. I wanted to sleep all the time. I didn't want to be bothered, but in my mind, I knew I still had to go on, you know, and all I kept thinking about is that, okay, I got to really grow up, you know, because I was still mama's baby. And it took a while because at the age of 29, 30, you know, me and my mom was still living together. You know, she wasn't working, I was working, so, you know, I didn't do nothing. My mama washed my clothes for me. She would cook. You know, the only thing she had to do was open her mouth and she got it from me. So that was hard. And it took a long time because I had, like, clothes, like, piled up. You know, and thank God I had the clothes because I didn't wash for a long time. So when I got it together to wash, I was like, okay, half of this going to the cleaners, and the half I had to, you know, to actually, you know, get washed and everything. But at the same time, too, I was like 50%. I know I got to get together because I have my brothers. Even though I'm the baby, they depend on me. So like, I got to get it together to make sure I continue to do certain things Mama did and to be there for them. But at the same time, it was still hard because in the back of my mind, I'm like, my mom's gone. What am I going to do? You know, it was rough. And you do need a support system. And thank God I had the support system that I had. I mean, Sister Keisha used to come to the house to make me get out of bed. You know, she used to like, girl, you need to take a bath. Oh, child, please, where am I going? You know, my wardrobe became sweats and a t-shirt. That was never me. I didn't care. To the point I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about whatever, you know, even though I still wanted to look decent or however, but I didn't, you know, it didn't matter to me. It didn't even matter. Nothing at that point mattered. My brother was like, girl, put some clothes on and try to go somewhere. I don't feel like it, you know. Also, the driving, I didn't want to drive, you know. And every time when I did start driving, and if I was on the highway or a truck or something was too close for me, I felt like I was about to get hit. I went through that for a moment. Alec can testify to that. Sometimes I'm in the car with him, like, I'm holding on for dear life, you know, because I only can depend on my driving, not not nobody else, you know. But it got better. But you know, that was pretty much the downfall that I went through.
Praise the Lord. Amen. Anybody else?
I think about with my mother when she passed away. I experienced some anger and some guilt, but mostly it was anger. My mom passed away. She actually had breast cancer that had metastasized to her brain. And when the night she died, I had gone to the hospital to be with my nephew. And so I gotten a call from my daughter at the time, who was my only child, to say, grandmother, something's going on with her. So I gotten back to her house, and the ambulance was there, and they were doing CPR, etc. And so she went to the hospital. She died that night, and I called my best friend. She came and picked me up, took me to the hospital. I did payroll, did everything I needed to do, got all the services together, didn't cry, and it was probably a month and a half later, I was on 95, and it just came out of nowhere. And I began to literally scream in the car. I was by myself, and I pulled over on the side of the road, and I began to beat on the wheel, and I said, God, why my mother? She was the good one. I had her aunt who, when she was young, she had cancer. She beat it. But she was always the one that did everything under the sun. And so I'm like, God, you should have taken her. You shouldn't have taken my mom, And so with my dad,